Location's probably the first thing I'd be looking at, of going, you can improve a house, you can paint it, you can put new carpet in, you can put floorboards in, you can renovate a kitchen, you can renovate a bathroom, you can do an extension, but you can't pick up your house from that street and move it to the quieter street, you can't move it to the better street, you can't move it to north-facing backyard versus south-facing backyard.
G'day guys, welcome to the MTDC Lounge. This is a podcast that breaks down everything you need to know about designing and building your ultimate home and what to expect. Whether you're a DIY renovator, a budding developer, or everything in between, we'll dive into the building journey, touching on what to expect, what's next, and how to go about it. We'll hear from a heap of experienced consultants and trades about all aspects. So let's get stuck in. Welcome to the lounge. Good evening, guys, and welcome to another episode of the MTDC Lounge. You've got your host, Matt, and today I've got a real estate agent named Michael Edwards from Shiels & Co. Real Estate. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, Matt. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to hit you with some pretty heavy questions today, and I know there's a lot of listeners and watchers that have a lot of questions about what to watch out for when buying a house, and anything that they should be aware, or maybe even ask you.
Yep.
So let's ask the hardest question first. What's your hardest sale or buy?
Look, I think where there's some unapproved works is always a bit of a challenge. Some of them can be pretty minor stuff. I've had stuff where a deck's been put on the back of a house, and it's just making sure that the buyer's aware of it and speaking to their conveyancer and making sure they're comfortable with it. But I think I've had some other ones where some of that information's come up during the sales process. It probably hasn't gone to get to the point where someone's buying it, because I think I pushed pretty hard to go, you need to pull it off the market and get this rectified. So retaining walls, some other works that just are unapproved and fairly significant stuff. You, as an agent, you're meant to have a duty of care for your purchaser, as well as obviously being employed by your vendor, the person selling the property. So I think I pushed pretty hard a couple of times to try to avoid that nightmare scenario of someone buying something that doesn't actually have an approval for something fairly significant, a little bit more than a deck, fairly major retaining walls and actual constructions, whole floors of houses that have been done without the proper approval in place and without meeting proper specs, which you deal with day to day.
Yeah. So how do you go through your due diligence? Like when say a client comes up and says, "Hey, Mike, sell my house for me."
Yep.
What are your steps to make sure that house is proper to sell?
Look, I think some of it is looking at how old the house is. It'll track back of how much information is going to be available. If there's recent work done, it's a pretty easy check in Newcastle and Lake Macquarie Council and most councils to jump on and see if there's a DA in place for any of that work, and then actually see whether that work's been signed off and completed as well. So that's easy on the more recent stuff. So being able to do that due diligence, you're working hand in hand with a conveyancer or solicitor that any property that's been put to market needs to have a contract of sale, and most of the time solicitors will be going through and going, does it have an occupation certificate? Do we have documentation around DAs or anything else, pools, additions, secondary dwellings, all those sort of things. So I think for the legal parts of it, you're relying on the solicitors and conveyancers you're working with and doing checks across the contracts that are presented to you, and then if it's more recent work, councils have got a lot of that stuff stored on their portals that you can go off and do your checks. And I think it's something that buyers should be doing themselves if they're looking at a property as well. If there's any sort of question marks that come up, or if there's any tingling in their stomach or a feeling about it, they can go off and do some of those checks on their own. Their conveyancer and solicitor should be working with them on that as well, and before exchanging on contracts they should be doing those checks as well. But I think you can't always rely on other people to get those things checked off. You're employing professionals, but worth doing a bit of a check on some of that stuff yourself, to make sure it does get done.
We see it all the time. We have clients come in and say, "Hey, we love this back area," or this like they'll even say, they'll come straight up to us and say, "Oh, this bit looks a little bit tacked on. We actually want to address it and maybe make it a little bit more fresh." And then we find out when we go do the application, or when we go and find our reports, like there's the GIPA report and things like that we get in particular to find out exactly what's happened. The GIPA is the Freedoms of Information Act that we can get through council, and then with that, I guess we identify whether or not it's actually been approved, or if it's actually been a structure. So yeah, it's pretty crazy about what that means, I guess, for a client. That just starts a whole a new problem, I guess, when it comes to someone that's bought the property and then finds out that they need a building information certificate based on the product that they've got.
Yep.
Have you ever had a run in with somebody that's actually had to retrospectively get a building information certificate after a purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some, and look, depending on the works it is, that it sometimes can be pretty easy, depending on the quality of the work and whether they've gone about it with the right sort of professionals and it's been checked off. You can go back and get a certification on those sorts of things. Some of them are pretty major, but like there was one that I came across. It was a duplex on a site that you weren't able to do a duplex there. It was a full-on second dwelling. It was an old shed, a fairly significant size one that had been converted. They had people actually renting it out and living in it. It was rented privately. As an agency, we weren't prepared to take on that management of that property because it wasn't compliant. So you then get into all sorts of issues around your insurance, around your landlord's insurance and all those sorts of things. So you get some fairly major ones, and it can be a bit of a flow-on effect if you've bought something that doesn't have the proper certificates and OCs and approvals on it. Are you then going back and retrospectively trying to get it all approved and through that building information certificate? And do you do that before you've then got to sell your house? Or have you bought something that you've then got to figure out, do we need to rip off the back part of the house because it hasn't been done to code and it's not compliant? Do we have to get rid of a deck? That might be a smaller one, little pergola at the back, not so much of an issue, but it's those fairly major extensions that you see from time to time that have been put on with sometimes they're owner builders and they slap stuff up. They haven't actually used any trades, let alone got the proper certification around what they're doing. So it can create a bit of a flow-on or a domino effect. If you bought a house that doesn't have that proper certification in place and then you go to sell it, is it going to devalue the house? Is it something you've then got to fix up before you go off and sell it? So there has been people caught out on it, unfortunately, and it is you're relying on your conveyancer or your solicitor to help you through that. But I think people can do their own due diligence and check through council approvals and those sorts of things out there as well.
So they come to you and say, Mark, I want you to sell my place for me, and then you find out that they've got a structure that they've bought the house with, and then now that they want to sell it, you've done the right thing and done the due diligence, and everybody's done the right thing and found out that this is actually unapproved. Then the client's faced with having, I guess, an unapproved structure after they've bought it, and then they're trying to sell it for you. Now, I'm only asking that question because it's happened several times to us now.
Yep.
What's your advice to those people to try and handle that situation?
I think if you can, addressing it, that depending on the scope of the works that have been done that are unapproved, I think most people don't want to hand on their problem to someone else, even though they may have inherited it. They might have picked up a site that has unapproved work. They weren't aware of it, didn't get picked up by conveyancers or solicitors, wasn't disclosed. Most people probably don't want to hand on that sort of issue to someone else. So it's looking at it, getting out and talking to someone like you about, well, this is what we've got. Can you have a look at it? What are our steps to go off and get the actual approval? So get the retroactive approval, or you can't get a retroactive approval, but get it all ticked off essentially. Doing that, or your other avenue is you sell it as an unimproved works, but a disclosure up front, and you're probably taking a hit on what your property is worth. There have been people who've gone, great, we'll jump in and buy that for probably under market value because there is unapproved works there, and they maybe are in the game. They might be a trade. There might be someone in that sort of space who knows that they can go through and get an approval for that or get a sign off for it after the fact. But I think they're your two avenues of going, well, can we fix it and what's it going to cost? And does the timing work out? Some people need to sell and they need to move, and there's a timeline attached to that. And it then might be taking that hit and going, well, we need to do it with the disclosure around this is unapproved. And I've sold stuff, as I said, with decks and some minor stuff, pergolas, attachments to house. Not necessarily fairly major stuff along those lines that are going to really trip you up where you're going to demolish a whole floor of your house.
It's interesting to me because it's one of the conversations, like there's countless times that we've had, but one in particular that sticks in mind is a gentleman bought a space out of Stockton, and he had a garage in the back, but it was sold to him with a granny flat out the back. And so he bought it and he put his mum in there and all that kind of stuff. And council came knocking on his door. Now, the funny story about this is that council acknowledged that it was there, Post acknowledged the number as whatever the number is, A, and then he's had it for years, and then all of a sudden someone's given him a bit of a tap on the shoulder and said, "That's not approved."
Council don't just randomly come knocking on people's doors.
Yeah, we all know that, but
Yep.
someone has told them, and obviously they come over and knock on the door. So this poor bloke came to us and said, "Hey, what's going on?" We went through the Gipper, went through everything. So we ended up finding the report saying that the job was put in for a DA and then got knocked back, but it was built anyway, but then still somehow registered via post. So this was a whole rigmarole. This went on for 12, 18 months. This, to cut a very, very long story short, he went through title insurance. He didn't want to sell it, but he definitely didn't want to get rid of his granny flat. He was looking after his mum. So he ended up having to knock down the garage, do another application for the garage to be removed, and then to put a granny flat in its space. And then it had to go and get rebuilt as a separate structure, completely separate of the garage.
Huge cost.
It's complete. It's wild, and the whole process is gross. And I guess there's no way that the real estate agent would have known that, because there was plans.
Yep.
But there was no way to say that the DA wasn't approved.
Yep.
And then because there was already an A, or the post recognized it as an address, there was the only way that was ever going to find out is somebody tapping somebody else on the shoulder.
And how far do you go? And most people don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to go, let's get a lawyer involved. The council's clearly made a mistake by sending a registration out for it, and they're not going to admit to it. And council really don't have a lot of grey area with that sort of stuff. If it's not an approved dwelling in particular, decks and those sort of things, they're fairly minor. But an additional dwelling, they don't have a lot of grey area on that. But a huge, obviously, impost in terms of time, stress, and dollars to your client, that sometimes things, unfortunately, just slip through, which is not great. And I think for a lot of people, as I said, he's gone out and he's bought a place, probably his dream place, and he's looking after his mum, but he's now had to go through what I'm sure is quite a journey and an emotional one as well to get to that point, and a huge cost to rebuild it. So it is something that people can get caught out on. It can be quite costly from a dollar's point of view, and it can be probably even worse from an emotional toll on people having to go through and deal with that.
It's pretty tricky. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for the fun stuff now, first homeowners, they're looking to buy a place. How would you guide, or what would you suggest that their first thing is to look for when buying a house?
Look, I think before they're looking, you want to have your approvals in place. We don't see it as much anymore, but people don't always have their finance in place, so they don't know exactly what they can borrow, but that's usually the first step. I've had a few friends, and I'm constantly getting text messages going, I'm looking at this place, what do you think it's going for? And it's an unfortunate part at the moment that every time the government releases some sort of incentive, it has a surge on pricing. So it's sort of hurting those people as well as helping them at the same time. And I think it's hard, not making excuses for real estate agents, but when you've got that real surge in a market, it's hard to sort of be on top of where the pricing's going. So I think it's doing your own research, not relying on a price guide if agents are publishing it, so that you're not wasting time. I think that's the biggest complaint and the biggest thing that I hear a lot of the time. People really, really getting frustrated. There's a guide on it, says 800. We've turned up and there's 50 people at an open home. You know it's going for more. And it's an unfortunate situation at the moment. It seems to be happening quite a bit, but I think having your approval in place, having your budget, of what you're prepared to go to, doing a little bit of research yourself around comparable sales. That Domain and realestate.com.au list all the previous sales in that direct area. So having a look and being realistic. And then I think it's having your real priorities and trying to stack your priorities of is location over quality of a house your priority? Is this going to be a home that you're in for 20 years that you're prepared to do a bit of work on? We'll put your location a little bit higher on your ranking than the quality of your house. You can't change the location of a property. There's plenty of property TV shows around, location, that it's probably one of the biggest priorities, that make sure your location of your house is good. It'll have a huge impact on the long-term value of your house, or townhouse or apartment or whatever, to type of property you're looking to buy. But location's probably the first thing I'd be looking at, of going, you can improve a house, you can paint it, you can put new carpet in, you can put floorboards in, you can renovate a kitchen, you can renovate a bathroom, you can do an extension, but you can't pick up your house from that street and move it to the quieter street. You can't move it to the better street. You can't move it to north facing backyard versus south facing backyard. So for me, I think location's really important. I think one of the things that we probably find more now that first home buyers in particular don't necessarily think about is your first home is very rarely your last home. There's people we still run into have been in the same house for 70 years and they're not leaving that house. That's where they're going to finish up. But it happens less and less these days. People are a little bit more mobile with the housing, and part of that is the affordability issues around it. But I think looking at it and going, well, is this going to be something that we can resell and add some value to that helps us as a stepping stone get to our next one? I think you find people, even though I said location, I'm talking probably the micro location rather than the macro location there. So maybe not the busiest street in the neighbourhood, maybe one that's close to parks and close to schools and is desirable within that particular suburb. But I think also looking and going, well, because we started a certain area doesn't mean we can't sell in a few years' time if we've added some value, built up some equity, and move into that next area that we probably want to be in long term. Merriweather's a place that lots of people want to be in, but it's pretty unaffordable for 90% of the population, probably 95% of the population, but that's where you want to end up. Doesn't mean you have to start there. That looking at what the links in the chain might be if your first home's not necessarily going to be your last home.
Perfect. And it's a perfect segue. What are the factors when, I guess, looking for a home to use as those stepping stones in terms of growth and equity?
Yep.
I mean, like, is there a certain distance you would expect to move out of your goal area? What are the things that people should be looking out for those stepping stones to actually take effect? And I'll be a little bit more clear. Like, you could places like Cessnock. Cessnock is slowly going up, but probably haven't seen the same amount of growth as Wall's End.
Yep.
Like, what are those key factors that people should be looking out for to understand that there's going to be growth?
We're in an information age, and we have been for a fair while, that you can go off and research and you can have a look at what the growth history of any particular suburb is. So they're usually pretty consistent. So having a look at what Wall's End's grown at each year for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So if it's grown at 7% annually and Cessnock's only growing at 5% annually, it's only 2% in the first year, but that compounds over the next 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 years. So that compounding is where that gap really starts to open up. So I think having a look at the growth of particular suburbs, then getting into the micro, try to avoid main roads if you can, from a residential point of view, that they are a little bit harder to sell. Every property I've had on a main road, it just takes that little bit longer. There's not as much demand for those main road properties. Try to avoid backing onto maybe a train line, those sort of major things. You've put Cessnock as an example. Probably don't buy right next to the jail in Cessnock. There's some no-go zones that will really hamper your long-term growth of any property. So looking at those factors of what's a desirable house or townhouse unit, whatever it might be. And I think the next bit is probably, again, when someone like you comes into it, Matt, of going, have we got something that we can add value to? Is it something that is it a bigger block? Can we put a granny flat down the back that all of a sudden turns this into a dual income property, that instead of selling this to get into our dream home, we've now got dual incomes. Do we turn this into a rental and an investment for us that we're able to pull the equity out of to then get into our dream home? So I think looking at ways you can add value. So is it a bigger block of land? Is it a house that's got scope to do something with? That home that I bought, that we bought an old weatherboard house, but it had a garage underneath. We've actually been able to excavate underneath. We've added a 4th bedroom, added a laundry, added a bathroom, another living area, all things that add significant amounts of value to a property. Is it an older house that touched on before? Can you do painting, new bathroom, new kitchen? So looking at those value adds, and I know you've done lots of those things for your clients, but looking at, can we split the block in half? Can we retain part of it? Is it a corner site? They work particularly well for those splitters. Can we split it off and subdivide the block out the back? Had a client and a friend do that in not that long ago in Cardiff, and managed to do extremely well out of it. That it was a big corner block, managed to put another dwelling on the back, subdivide it, and he's now got 2 properties to sell instead of one. That really then accelerates that ability to jump into that next property and jump that next suburb in or into your desired area. So I think it's looking at how you can manufacture growth, as well as looking at how is this particular suburb and this house in this particular suburb going to grow.
So how much is too much? So if someone's bought a property and let's just say, hey, yeah, we can do something to it. Let's say they want to add an extra couple of bedrooms, or, you know, they're taking a 2-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. When do you turn around and tell a client that a lick of paint in your garden would be enough to, because when you're doing these things, obviously time equals money, and holding costs are always going to add up. And then there's the applications and the process and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the heartache of, you know, going through the build or not, and then actually going through the process. At what point do you go, just paint it, change the carpets, sell it?
Yep. Look, I think there's a lot of those scenarios that we go through that it is looking at that return on investment. And I think when someone's looking to sell a property in the short term, the metric we always use is 3-to-1. Can you get $3 back for every dollar you spent? So if you go put in a 10 grand kitchen, is it giving you a $30,000 increase in your property? Or does a lick of paint get you to a certain level, but updating a bathroom in a 1960s house probably isn't going to move you to that next level? And if you're then starting to get into, do we look at extending, adding bathrooms, adding bedrooms, adding a garage? You then start, as you said, to talk time, money, and a bit of pain as well. So I think it depends on their timing, that there is that balance of going, that metric of going 3-to-1. So every dollar I'm spending, am I going to get $3 back on it? And there's sometimes balance to go, well, there are certain things that you want it to present well. There's some houses you see out there, deceased estates and renovators' delights, and there's all those terms that real estate agents use for it, where you go, don't touch it. Someone's going to come in and just shell it and just start from the bare bones. So whatever you're doing to it won't matter, because they're just going to rip it all up anyway. But I think if you've got a property, doing a fresh coat of paint is probably one of the best investments you can do. It does make a huge difference. So a lick of paint will freshen up most sort of properties, but it's then that question of, are we really going to get a return on investment in our dollars, but also our time on something like that?
Now, would you recommend your clients or homeowners to come and see you in particular, or would you push them towards an evaluator to get an understanding of whether or not it's going to be worth doing something to it?
Look, I think talking to me is probably a good starting point. Some people might want to go to that further step of evaluation. But I think you can walk in and you go, well, a coat of paint's going to freshen it up. It might cost you 10 grand to paint a house internally, but I think that's going to get you into that next price bracket. So it might take you from an 800 to an 850, or moving and changing that study and turning it into an actual bedroom changes you from a 3 to 4 bedroom in this particular suburb. On average, $1 million, 3-bedroom houses sell for $1 million, 4-bedroom houses sell for 1.2. And you start to look at that and go, well, changing a 3 to a 4 has a significant impact on where they're going to be. So I think we can give some guidance to people around that, and give some people, I think, sometimes go that little bit too far. They don't always get that return on investment. And I think sometimes you need that external voice to be able to go, just pull that back a little bit. Sometimes you get the other side of it. People will just go, we're just going to sell it as. We're not going to style. We're not going to paint. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to sell it with our furniture, or we're going to sell it with the tenant in there if it's an investment property. And it might take that little bit longer to sell. It might not get quite that premium. You lose one buyer from a property because they didn't like how it felt, or it didn't really feel that nice because there was no furniture in there. It can be tens and $20,000 and $50,000 from one extra bit of competition and having some competing bids coming on a property.
So that, and again, there's so much information that I just kind of want to draw out of you. Like, I mean, if they're doing the liquor paint and they want to go through the process, I would almost argue that you're probably the number one person to go to before anybody, before they go and talk to a builder, before they go and talk to a drafter or a designer. They want to know whether or not their place is going to be worth the effort that they're willing to put in.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, at most agents are the person on the spot. They've got the on-ground information. They've got the current market information as well, that markets can move and swing. That I think from 1st of October, we've seen a real uplift in certain price points because of the first home buyer incentives that are being rolled out from the government. So I think the real estate agents are on the ground with that current information. So they are probably the best and first port of call you should be making. You then go off to your builders, you then go off to your designers and get some quotes and some numbers and start to work through it. But I think a real estate agent should be able to give you that initial information of going, look, if you do this, it's going to move you up into that 1.2 bracket rather than that $1 million bracket. Or if you do those couple of things, it's going to cost you 6 months' time. You're going to have to go and get a DA. You're going to have to go through all those processes. I don't think it's worthwhile because you guys have already bought your next house. It's just not going to line up with your timeline of where you need to be and the time that you need to do it in.
G'day guys, just quickly, if you're finding this podcast info relevant to you, then I'd like to quickly talk to you about what we do at MT Design Collective. You hear us talk all the time about the importance of solid detailed home design practices so that you're not left with extra fees, delays or unexpected costs in building your ultimate home. Here at MTDC, we design homes and provide plans that builders love to build and councils love to approve. If you're looking at a renovation, a new build, or alteration, then we'd love to help you work out the next steps forward. Book a free, no obligation chat with us, and we'll come out to your site as it's the only way to truly get authentic, no bullshit advice. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. So do you think that there are tactics that some real estates actually do to try and get those people across the line, or I guess capture those? Everybody needs to make money. Everybody, I get that. So,
yep.
But do you think there is some people say, you know, next to real estates, there's only one more slimier industry. Like, what do you say to those people that, hey, this is that you're a trustworthy real estate agent, we want the best for you? What are the things that people can watch out for to make sure that they've got the right real estate agent looking after them and their best needs?
I think you're probably referring to used car salesmen as the next ones on the ladder there, but lawyers, so there's a few of them in that basket. I look at, it's a struggle I have with the industry of sometimes that they're salespeople. They're trying to sell their services. They're trying to sell you into selling your property, and they're trying to pitch something to you. I think sometimes it's questioning and going, well, okay, give me some evidence. I think that's the thing I'd be always saying of going, well, Michael, you're telling me if I turn my study from a study into a fourth bedroom, it's going to potentially put me into a price bracket. Show me the evidence. Show me the properties that have sold 4 bedroom for 1.2, because you're telling me at the moment it's worth probably $1 million. But if I do this little change and it's just boxing into a fourth bedroom, it's going to give me an extra $200,000. That's a big jump in price. Yeah. Show me the evidence. So, and that's pretty easy to verify. As I said, Domain and Real Estate before are open portals. They've got sales on there. Go and have a look and go and compare things. Yeah. Take your rose-coloured glasses off. I think most people are in their home because they love their actual home, and it's hard to remove their own emotion from the feeling of that. And you get people who go, oh, no, my home's better than that one. But you're like, well, hang on, let's pull it back. Yep. Yours is a 3-bedroom and there's a 4-bedroom. There's some differences there. You've got a garage, they've got a carport. They've got a pool, you don't have a pool. They're all sort of factors that weigh in to what a property's worth. And I think it would be question things is probably the bit of advice I'd give of question agents, push them, ask for evidence, and ask for validation of where they've done it before and where they've seen that happen before. I've got case studies of properties where you've gone, let's just not rush to the market now. This property needs a little bit of work, whether it is the coat of paint and some styling. One in Mayfield that was a deceased estate, and they were really trusting with me, which I very much appreciated. And we got painters in, and we got multiple offers on it, and we sold prior to auction because we had just a knockout offer on it. So I think you're going to have some case studies that back up of going, well, if you spend this amount, this is where you're going to be looking. Yep. If you don't, this is the impact it's going to have. So I think ask for questions, ask for case studies, ask for information to back up and justify what they're talking about, because they're real estate salespeople and their job is to sell themselves, but sell things to you. And I'd just be questioning them, just like with the used car salesman. Yeah.
So there's a process for people to obviously check on builders' licenses, and obviously, designers have like a referral, like a referral score. Like obviously we have a referral, like on Google,
Yep.
you've got your ratings and stuff like that. Is there a method that somebody can go and look for, an amazing real estate and essentially land in your lap? How does somebody find a good real estate agent?
Well, I think you've touched on it, referrals. That
Yeah.
look, there's some different platforms, and there's Google reviews for any type of business. But there's some different platforms specific to real estate agents. Realestate.com.au has a sort of testimonial section, but I think you find that they're all positive, no matter who the agent is. That all the testimonials that get put up online are positive ones. Otherwise, they don't go online. I'd be asking friends, neighbours, family, who they've used and how their experience has been. I think I'd be going off and mystery shopping them in some ways. Turn up at open homes and see how a real estate agent treats you. Do they look you in the eye and say hello? And do they ask if you've got any questions? Do they follow up with you on Monday or Tuesday to see if there's any interest in the property? I think you've got the ability to verify some of the things they're saying, but I think I'd start with referrals, which is how a lot of my business comes to me as well. Because I think most of those online portals are very much slighted towards the positive. So I'd be asking people questions, but I'd also be going off and trying to verify what you're being told from someone else as well. Like with the questions around, well, show me the evidence. I'd be looking for evidence that real estate agents are out doing their job every Saturday. I'd be asking them questions. I'd be seeing how they engage with everyone at an open home. That there's some real estate agents that you turn up in shorts and thongs and you may get a little bit of a different reaction than if you turn up in a BMW. So making sure that they're good people and treating everyone fairly, making sure they're following up and doing their job of did you have any questions on the property? If you did have questions, making sure that they're actually getting back to you with the right information on it. So I'd be going out and test drive, going back to the used car salesman, but I'd be going out and test driving it a little bit before I'd make a commitment, because I think for most people, their houses are the biggest single asset anyone owns in their lifetime. Selling that house is probably one of the biggest financial decisions they make. Choosing a great agent over a good agent is fairly consequential in that scenario. And I think choosing the wrong one can be pretty hard and fairly consequential in a financial point of view. But if you're selling a home, it's probably one of the biggest, and it's an emotional roller coaster. Even if you've got someone competent and good at their job guiding you through, there's lots of ups and downs in selling a home, and it's a very emotional journey. So having someone that you trust and you're comfortable with and holding your hand and guiding you through that process is probably just as important, and someone you actually trust, because you are going to get to the crunch on auction day, or you are going to get offers coming in, and your question is going to be, should we be accepting this offer? Should we be looking for more? What should we be doing? And you want someone giving you the truth on that of, look, we thought we were aiming at 1.2, but the market feedback at the moment is probably closer to 1.1. You need to hear that, and you need to hear it relatively early rather than sitting on the market for 6-8 weeks hoping to get that 1.2. And 6 or 8 weeks later, coming to the realization yourself, because your agent hasn't given you the right feedback from day one, that we're maybe a little bit over on where we should be. We should be adjusting our guide. We should be looking at those parties that were more around that 1.1 mark rather than that 1.2 mark.
So what would you suggest to, I guess, the sellers, the vendors? What would you suggest would be red flags to watch out for before hiring a real estate agent?
If they're too salesy,
Yep.
If they've landed themselves in the Newcastle Herald recently, it's probably one I'd stay away from. But I think getting them into your home, seeing how they interact with you, as I said, test driving, seeing how they deal with people at open homes. There's people that they're not, you can tell within 2 minutes of walking into an open home, and how they treat you and greet you is really important. That you want someone, or at least for me, if I'm selling my home, I want they're representing you and your home. I want someone that's going to treat everyone that they meet, everyone that comes into your home fairly and equally, regardless if they turn up in shorts or thongs, or if they turn up in a Mercedes. So I think looking for those red flags when you're trying to test them out at open homes, asking questions and pushing them and asking for verification on numbers. And I think there's a really bad saying around real estate agents, so the biggest liar wins, that the person who comes in and tells you the biggest number that your house is worth is going to get your listing. That I think that's mostly on the real estate agents. but there's a little bit of blame that goes on vendors because they do sit there with rose-coloured glasses on and go, he's come in and told me it's worth 1.8. Nothing else in this suburb sold for 1.8. Yes, I've got a great house, but the next one's 1.2. There's not a lot of verification or justification to say that I'm worth 1.8. So I think it is really questioning those things and being a little bit reflective and self-critical, but I think that's one of the worst things that people do, and they bid for listings by telling you the number that you want to hear or telling you the biggest number, and that's who you go with because you think you're going to get that number, and then they've got to process some of them where it is just get the listing, hang on to it, condition the seller down to a point, rather than looking and asking them, well, what's your process? How are you actually getting me there? You're telling me I'm going to get a suburb record by a fair amount. How are you going to create competition with buyers? How are you going to market my property so that it reaches the most amount of people? How are we going to get people to believe that this property is worth 1.8 million when the next best one in the suburb is significantly less than that? And there's ways to do that. You can look at, well, we're on the edge of a suburb, so the suburb next door to us that might actually just be 20 metres down the road, they're in the $1.8 to $2 million range. So we think we're a little bit more comparable to that because we're actually sitting over the borderline, but we were pretty close. Or the other properties that have sold in this suburb that are a fair way behind us are 1,000 square metres less. We're on a 2,000 square metre block. So we're sitting in a very different category than most of the other properties in this sort of market at the moment. So it is testing them, asking for verification, trying to verify yourself and not get sold to.
So is underquoting a big problem in the industry, you think?
Yeah, look, it is. I think there's lots of really bad sayings about real estate agents, and I think a lot of them exist for reasons. I think stereotypes are there for reasons, but I think unfortunately it's some I'm not going to say outliers, but some bad operators in certain industries that give the rest of them a bad name as well. But there's another saying of pitch them low and see them go, that you put your price low, you're going to get 1,000 people through the door, they're going to compete and they're going to go way over. And there's a couple of agents that are just widely known in the industry to put their price guides ridiculously low. And you talk to buyers, and after you've been to one or two of their auctions and you've missed out, you start to get an understanding of, it's not, well, this has just been a really hot auction, it's gone a little bit over because people have gone really hard at it. This is a deliberate strategy that they've employed to get people in and waste their time and money. People go off and they'll get contracts reviewed by conveyancers. They're not doing that for free a lot of the time, or solicitors. It's costing them money, but it's also costing them time. There's nothing worse than going to an auction with a guide of 800,000 and you've got 20 people registered, bunch of first home buyers there with their parents there supporting them, and the opening bid's 950, and you just see the faces in the crowd just get crushed. You can adjust price guides throughout a campaign, which is what agents should be doing. If they're getting feedback, if they're getting offers, it is a tight balance. You can get people throwing numbers at you with no validation. That I've had someone offering on a property sight unseen, I want to offer this, I want to buy it now before the open home on Saturday. I don't want the open home to go ahead. No one's seen the property. And you just, no, come along and have a look at it, and then I'm happy to put your offer before the vendor. They don't turn up. So you get these sort of phantom offers sometimes that can be really disruptive to a campaign. But if you've got genuine buyers that you're qualified and they're giving you a formal offer or realistic offers, you need to put it to your vendor. If you're getting a formal offer, it needs to go to your vendor. And you need to be potentially adjusting your price guide. If you've got a set strategy that you want to sell at auction, you can stick to that, but adjust your price guide so that the market has a fair understanding of what the property's worth and what it should go for.
They're cracking down on it now anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Look, I think there's a bit of a blitz from Fair Trading, which is sort of the body that oversees that part of it. Again, I know a few of those agents who basically just factor the fines into their cost of doing business, unfortunately, they built their whole business around it. They really stick to it and just won't take any offers before, which is fine. They're very, very clear about that of, we're not presenting any offers to our vendor. They don't want to see offers. This is our guide. That's fine. But you then look at the comparable property that's down the road that sold for $300,000 more, 4-bedroom house, same size yard, same size house, both got double garages, both similar vintage, and you go, well, something's a bit fishy here. So again, it is a little bit on the purchasers to maybe do a little bit of research around it, have an understanding. And I think if you go to a few open homes and auctions, which you should be doing as part of your process of looking at agents and who you're going to choose on your own property, but also having and getting an understanding of the market and how it's operating at the moment, you should probably get an understanding of those handful of agents that are probably dubious practices around it. I think there are times when the market runs really, really hot. 2021 coming out of COVID was a really, really abnormal time in the market. And it was really hard because there was huge price jumps for each property, and each property that went to the market set a new benchmark, and you're trying to constantly catch up and chase your tail on it. It's a little bit the same at the moment in that probably that sub $1 million mark at the moment with those first home buyer grants or first home buyer guarantees, coming through. That is really hot in that market. It's hard, and you just got to keep adjusting. But as I said before, you can and you should be adjusting your price guide as a campaign moves along. If you're getting that feedback or you're seeing other properties, and every real estate agent sits on Domain and Real Estate and see who else is listing what and who else has sold something. If they've got comparable sales suggesting that your price guide's no longer relevant, they should be updating it.
Yeah, so, well, I'm glad we're talking about now, like, what it looks like for the purchase, I guess the purchaser. Like, what happens, I mean, I remember when I was a first home buyer, it was an absolute nightmare. I remember I remember setting ourselves, I'll start that again. We thought that the purchasing timeline would be far easier than what it really was. And all the mates that have done the same thing during the same period, and even now, like even right now, like they're increasing the money for the first homeowners grant or whatever they're doing. So they're bumping those prices up, obviously pushing those numbers up. And then it's making the market incredibly difficult to, I guess, inject themselves into, because $850,000 is a lot of money to spend.
Huge.
So I guess what recommendations or advice would you give to the first homeowners or the first, or even any purchaser that are looking for a house, whether they're renovating, knocking down, new build, whatever have you? What do you recommend they do? Because the purchasing space is incredibly difficult to navigate, particularly if we've got a real estate agent who's going to push that price up and always saying, there's someone talking to us in the back here who's going to say they're going to give us another 15 grand. Can you match that 15 grand? Oh yeah, okay, I'll match that 15 grand. But all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, they've come up from their price margin of 850,000 and then putting themselves in a further debt of sometimes the tune of 50 grand, maybe even more, to try and win that house that they've grown attached to.
Look, I think the first one is trying to be asking the agents what the process is, and trying to be really clear. An auction, I really like auctions. They're a clear and transparent process that that you're going to line up at Saturday at 11 o'clock. All the other buyers have to be there or on the phone, and that you can see who's bidding against you. The scenario you've given there of real estate agent on the phone, someone else has come in with an offer, you need to match it, you need to go up. It is not a really clear and transparent process.
Is there actually somebody there?
Oh, look, when I'm saying it, I try. You're not trying to hoodwink people. That I think you've tried to price a property accurately. People should know that if they've turned up and they're only person in an open home, maybe you should be questioning that. If they are running hot and you've got 50 other people and there's shoes lined up out the door, that there's lots of competition on it. But I'd be trying to be really clear about the process, because I think you can, especially with private treaty sales, where it is just the agent going, well, you got to give me your offer and I'll go off and get other offers. Trying to be clear about a process. Have they got a timeline that they want offers in? Are these best and final offers? So if I give you this offer, you're not coming back to me asking for more, because at that point, put your absolute maximum on the table if this is a house you want to own and live in. And if you lose out, someone's had a bigger budget than you and you miss out, you're going to start the process again. So I think trying to probe and be really clear about the process, be clear about timelines with those sort of things as well. But unfortunately in private treaty, they don't necessarily have to set a timeline. They don't have to set a process. It's just, we'll put all offers to our vendor and they'll make decisions around that. So it's not transparent for everyone. And that's really hard, especially if you do have the market we do at the moment in that probably sub $1 million bracket, where there is lots of competition. There's lots of people out there lining up to buy properties. So it's a hard one, and I don't probably have an easy solution for people other than being prepared. The one advice, and I'd said earlier that I had a friend and he's messaged me and he's managed to buy a house and over the moon for him. But he's shifted around and looked at a few different suburbs. There've been different types of properties. One's needed a bit of renovation, but in a slightly better location. One has been the fixed up, finished up thing, but in a slightly different location, a little bit further out than when he was first looking at. But I think have some flexibility around it. Look at those criteria that we touched on earlier around, can you add some value to it? But I think time is a really tough thing as well at the moment, that if you're not, especially in that cohort, if you're not buying now, and we saw it a lot in 2021 with a similar sort of incentives, but more of it came in and a bit of market frenzy. And it wasn't just in that first home buyer bracket, it was across the board in all price brackets, that if you didn't push yourself early and you didn't buy, it was actually going to cost you 50 grand more for the same house in 3 to 6 months time. So I think get your finances ready, get someone helping and guiding you along. And if you actually know a real estate agent and you do trust them, use them as a sounding board, use them as a bit of help. If you've got parents who have bought and sold property, if you know people like you know the real estate industry, you've been through the process yourself, you know lots of people, you know people you can put them in touch with, but use all the resources you can, because I think especially in these sort of frenzied short-term markets, that time is a real killer. That paying, and we've seen people being a little bit picky around stuff, going, oh, this is not quite right. But you see them in the market 6 months later still shopping for a house, and they're buying an inferior property to the one that they're a little bit picky about here. So I think be clear about what your goals are. Is this your first house? Is it your forever house? Is it something that you're going to use as a stepping stone? Have a list of things that you're working on. Location should probably be at the top all the time. Budget's a really important one in there, but have a list of priorities for you. You're never going to get 10 out of 10, especially if you're in that first home buyer bracket. Even if you're in the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million range, you're never going to get an absolutely perfect house. That's what you come to you for later on, to do a reno, to get everything you want in it. But have that list, and if you can tick your location is done, but 7 out of 10 things on the rest of the list, and the other things you can tweak a little bit, I'd be jumping all over it. And I think time is a real killer for a lot of people at the moment. It's going to cost them money.
Yeah. So I know from personal experience, like when we were trying the process, we were super naive. Like we were like, yeah, we're going to go in there and we're going to try and we're going to negotiate. And we're going to have this whole, we're going to have this, we're going to have this barter situation where we're going to offer a price, we're going to get an offer back, and all this. We went in there super green, like it was a lot of years ago. But when we got to the process, I think the agent turned around and goes, "What's your number?" And I can't remember. It was I think it was 500,000 at the time.
You should have bought two of them. At the
yeah. And he goes, and he turns around and goes, "Nah, too low." Never heard from him again. And then we found out that they sold it for 550. We had an actual budget of $600,000 at the time, and then we're like, we would have paid more for it because we really enjoyed that place. And so we kept trying. I guess we kept trying that. We mixed and matched, and we tried these other alternative methods of trying to get through to the industry. But every time we were met with, there's someone that's offering more. You haven't offered enough. When they're not interested in that, there is a level, and there's so many. We got so disheartened by the end of the 6 months that we were just like, you know what, this is how much we're going to spend. This is how much we've got. Can we have it or not? And then almost from that moment, it was just like, yeah, okay, they're interested in that. But now there's a guy in the back here who's going to offer us $15,000 more, and we're like, well, we're pre-approved, we've got the money, we're ready to go, and then we're like, we don't want to spend any more, and they're like, oh, come on, and then they're kind of they're kind of pushing us to go, well, if you say $20,000 right now, it's yours, and then we go, right, $20,000 right now, fine, $20,000, that is it, and then it was even right up until the last day. We went in signing documents at the desk that day, and he turned around and goes, "You guys are super lucky because the guy that you were fighting against came in this morning saying that he was going to put $30,000 down." And then I was so jacked of it by then, because it was like six to 8 months ago. We were looking for this place, and I was just like, you know what? If you came back and said 30 grand, we would have walked away.
Yep.
And it's such a brutal process, particularly for purchasers, to try and even home buyers. I do not envy the first home buyers, particularly in this climate, because it's so hard.
It is super competitive.
Yeah, and like you've also got to fight the investors. You got to fight the investors who have got a lot of money. You got to fight the developers ready to build you, and these poor kids who are trying to buy a house, they're just getting pushed out of the market.
Yep. Look, I think there's a couple of things on that you tried to be really clear with them on the process of, if we offer this, they're not coming back, which is great. It sounded like it almost didn't happen. But I think one of the things that, if you get an offer accepted, you need to be moving at lightning speed. That most of the time you can exchange on a 0.25% deposit, which is a couple of grand. You should be able to transfer that straight away, get the documents, chase your solicitor, and make sure you get it signed and moved along. You've then done everything that you can in your power to move it along as quickly as possible, rather than leaving that window open for the other guy sitting in the background to maybe come along and gazump you, which is a terrible situation that happens. I think real estate agents are employed by vendors. That's who pays us. In the Real Estate Agents Act, we've got a duty of care to buyers in terms of disclosure of information and looking after them. Unfortunately, not all agents follow it, but I think it is really trying to be clear with the agent, trying to get those processes and what's going to happen from here. And I think trying to push and be clear that you work out which agents you can trust, trying to bring in one of the other solutions. There's more of them out around at the moment. Buyer's agency is an option as well. There's a lot more of those around who will go in and do some of that negotiation for you. They charge a fee, and it's a significant fee. But I think there's some really good ones out there that actually deliver value. They'll get some off-market properties that you may not have seen otherwise, and they'll negotiate. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of agents will deal a little bit differently with a buyer's agent than they will a young first home buyer that is a little bit green in that space. So that's one of the other solutions to try to do it. I think having a team of people around you, your solicitor, your conveyancer, and your mortgage broker, everyone's got to borrow money to do it. But speaking to your mortgage broker, having them do a little bit of work and be on the front foot for you as well can be really important. That having them move quickly, make sure you got your pre-approval in place, and probably not. Sometimes you're a little bit hesitant about whether you disclose to an agent what your full budget is, because you know they're going to go off and use that information against you. But I wouldn't try to think that you're going to, as a first home buyer.
That's smart.
I think you probably outsmart most of them, Matt, in the real estate space, but out negotiate them in one of their key skill areas. That's what real estate agents do every day of the week, every day of the year for their job, is negotiate and sell property. You're on your first property you're buying, and even if it's not your first property, most people maybe buy 2, 3, 4 properties in their life. If they're buying an investment, it might be a little bit more. If they're developing it, it's going to be a little bit more. But real estate agents, that's a core competency in their job, is negotiating. Don't expect that you're going to outsmart a real estate. I think you can outsmart most of them, but don't expect you're going to be able to out negotiate them or hoodwink them. You probably sometimes just need to lay your cards on the table, understanding that you're playing your cards up and they may use that against you. But if they're going to do that, they're probably going to find other ways to sort of get one up on you anyway.
Yeah. So like just an absolute personal opinion. I've had experience obviously with real estates themselves and trying to purchase and all that kind of stuff. But I've also had experience with the buyer's agent, and it is by far so less stressful with a buyer's agent. Look like that, they absolutely do. They charge a fortune, but in terms of like, I guess peace of mind and heartache, like they just do their thing, come back with best result, and then.
Yep. It's a really hard one, especially for first home buyers. You're using every dollar you can to try to get into a property. It's a hard balance to go, well, do I take 15 or 20 grand out of that? So it's reducing down my actual budget that I can afford to pay on a house to go off and buy something. But I think if you choose the right one, like in most things, they'll give you value, that they'll find you an off-market property where there's that little bit less competition, that they might get it at a slightly better price. They'll find that slightly better property for you. I think part of it is that they'll help you accelerate your decision-making as well. It's less stressful. You've got someone guiding you through that process as well. And instead of spending a good buyer's agent that I spoke with the other day, I think most people, there's research and information out there that most people spend between 6 and 12 months in the house buying process. Some of them start really early, a little bit of research, haven't got pre-approval done, then they start to go off. But you see people, and they're coming to open homes for 6 and 12 months. I think with the buyer's agent, usually they've purchased within 30 to 60 days.
Which is so good.
Which I think in the current market saves you money. So instead of being in the market in April next year, you've exchanged on a house before Christmas. That market's going to continue moving. I think it moved almost 1% last month.
That's crazy.
And you start to compound that. That's 10 and 12% in a year, and it compounds. So by April next year, you've moved up 4, 5, 6% compounded in that time. I think that buyer's agent, by helping you accelerate that buying process and find something, helping you really refine what you want as well. You asked earlier about what are your list of priorities. Location should be at the top. But they'll really help you refine and have them as a sounding board, because you are quite green. That even if you've got parents who've owned their own property, they may have only bought 1 or 2 properties in their lifetime. Again, that experience stacked up against a real estate agent who's selling 20, 30, 40, 50 properties in a year is pretty insignificant in terms of that experience. So having someone in your team that can help you is worthwhile looking at it. It's a hard scenario to figure out, do we put 15 or 20 grand pulled out of our budget to go into that? But I think if you choose the right one, it really can be worthwhile.
I completely agree. Mate, it's like every conversation and every person I have on the podcast, like there's so many more things, there's so many more questions, there's so many avenues that I want to go down. I'll have to definitely get you back on to have a chat about them. But to wrap up, I want to ask a few quick questions.
Right away.
And try and answer them as easy as you possibly can.
Speed round.
Do people really care about baths in houses? when you're selling or buying a house, do people actually care about if there's a bath or not?
Yes, some do. I think if you've got a young family, there's still babies, young kids, toddlers that go into an actual bath. So I think for young families, yes. For anyone above that, probably no. Townhouses where it's couples and sharers, no. I think probably the other end of the spectrum, if they've got plenty of time on their hand and they come home and crack a beer or a gin or whatever else it might be and sit in the bath with the candles and you're playing, probably a demographic for it. But I'd say for the broad market, not as important anymore.
I can't tell you how many times I have somebody walk through my door and say, oh, we should probably put a bath in there because the house sells better. Every time.
Takes up a huge amount of space. You're a designer, you know how much space it takes up in a bathroom. It's a huge cost as well. Wet areas are one of your most expensive areas in terms of a build, unless you have a really specific need or you have a really specific target market that you're going for in terms of selling your house. When you go to sell it, I'd steer away from a bath.
What's one upgrade that you would recommend people splurge on when buying a house?
I think buying a house or going into a new house, look, I think the ones that add the most value back are the ones that are most expensive. So new bathrooms, new kitchens. You spend an inordinate amount of time in your kitchen. You're getting breakfast ready, your lunch, you're cooking dinner. I think it's become the kitchen's a hub for a home as well, that more with the island bench tops, depending on the configuration, those sort of things, it's a real hub. Even though they're very expensive, I think the kitchen would be the one thing I'd probably put an upgrade into. I think I call it the blockification. Lots of people see the block in all these renovation shows and they've got unlimited budgets on these things. But I think the elevated expectation people have around kitchens in particular, that's one area I'd be putting a bit of money into.
And if you're a bloke, probably the toilet, right?
The toilet, the throne. Yes, that's the other way to
go. What do you reckon is the best finish, or not even the best? What's the finish that you think you would skip on if you were trying to sell the place?
Look, I think in terms of bang for buck, I'd be looking at your floorboards. That there's some really different ones. I think the old school view was you have to have natural timbers. There's engineered floorboards now that have the thin layer and the backing board on it that give you a very similar impact. And I think even beyond that, the manufactured timbers now, you've got to look pretty hard to actually see the difference on some of those. So I think you can get some really high level impact with some different choices in that space. I think the probably other one would be the bench tops. That Caesar Stone it's a particular brand, but I think you can really you can go slightly thinner. But I think there's a wide range of choices and brands in that sort of bench top space. that you can maybe get a bit more bang for your buck.
Yeah. Well, 100%. I've got engineered tiles in my place, and I've got a dog. I've got an Aussie Shepherd. She runs up and down that place. There's not a scratch, and I super appreciate it. What do you think? What do you think the most underrated pocket in Newcastle Lake Mac is? And what's better question? And I don't want to send everybody running out there, but what do you think is the most upcoming suburb in the Lake Mac Newcastle area?
I think the two biggest things from a natural point of view that we've got in Newcastle Lake Mac area is we've got beautiful, incredible water. So that'd be the two spots I'd be gravitating towards is beach. You've got to have a pretty hefty budget if you're going Merewether Bar Beach, but I think we've got an incredible lake. We've got a pretty big coastline. Blacksmiths is not cheap. One spot I always love just personally is Pelican. You've just got that beautiful little lake section. You've got Nauru Island there. Nauru Beach is just one of the best spots that I think most people don't know about in Newcastle Lake Macquarie area, but I'd be looking towards those sort of places if you had the budget to do it. They're a little bit expensive anywhere near the water. It's a commodity and it's a scarcity, so it's in demand. But I'd be looking at somewhere like Pelican near the water. I'd love to be a little bit closer to the water myself, so it probably is where I've got a bias towards. I think there's some different pockets. I always look at the bridesmaid suburbs without picking at a specific one. There's those sort of premium suburbs, somewhere like New Lambton, but you've got Katara next door to it that is a significantly lower price point that's just as accessible to everything. You've still got the parks, Fernley Track, all sorts of things near it. I'd be looking at sort of similar things that you've got. Garden Suburbs, one that it's a smaller area, but some big blocks of land, some different areas there that you could really look at and get some really great value from, really connected, accessible to places still as well. Yeah.
And I guess, and lastly, as a real estate, what's the best advice you could give?
As a real estate agent, best advice is do your research, I think. Be prepared and do your research. You don't want to go into Lions Den unprepared. And whether you're a seller or a buyer, I think doing your research is really, really important, whether it's researching the real estate agent you're looking to choose, whether it's real estate researching the area you're looking to buy in, whether the starting point of this conversation, researching the actual property you're looking to buy, and do your due diligence on it. Make sure it's got all the right certificates, make sure it's got an OC, make sure it's all compliant. So I think that's probably in real estate the number one bit of advice I'd give is do your research on people and properties.
Due diligence, always check your stuff, read your reports all the time. It's a common theme across the podcast. Well, mate, there you go, guys. There we have it. We've got Mike Edwards, the man. Thanks for coming out and joining us. And
really appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for listening to this week's ep of The Lounge. To make sure you don't miss out on the next episode, hit subscribe. We'd love to get the message out to more homeowners like you. Make sure you leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next ep.